inferiority feelings are normal for all human beings. Adler would say inferiority feelings are natural and normal. So if we didn't have inferiority feelings, we would have no motivation to grow. We have the choice to stop it. We can choose not to grow. A baby is born in an inferior position, but the baby doesn't stay thinking, oh, poor me, I'm inferior to my parents. No. But they know they're in an inferior position. And immediately, as soon as they come forth into the world, when they're not resting or eating or sleeping or pooping or peeing, they are beginning to develop their strength. They don't stop doing what they need to do in order to grow, to stand up, to run, to learn to skip. Okay. So at that point, infants or young children, very young children, know that they are enough.
I'm going to introduce my guest today. So I have the absolute honor of interviewing Deborah Owen-Sohocki. And Deborah, you're a certified positive discipline lead trainer. Please correct me in a minute if I get anything.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
You are also a licensed professional counselor. You're a global mentor and I believe a former director of the Positive Discipline Association.
Not a director, a co-chair of the board. No, that's fine. I was a co-chair of the board of the Positive Discipline Association. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And you have been inspiring me since I met you first last August to really dive deeper into the teachings of Alfred Adler and Rudolf Dreikurs. And I started joining your weekly groups in April, I believe, of this year. And your group is called Profoundly Deeper. And this is exactly what I would love to share with the parent who's watching this today, of who's interested. And I seem to attract a lot of parents who are interested in going deeper. And the shift that I've been observing in me is that this is not about me being a positive discipline parent educator. This is first and foremost to apply these principles to my own parenting, and I use them daily. So I would love if you introduced yourself and shared with us where you're from, and for the parent who watches this, if you have children, and how you got interested in Adlerian psychology.
Well, first of all, it is such an honor to be with you, Annette. And for those of you who are listening, Annette and I have connected already on such a deep level. We're just so here in wanting to go deeper and understanding more of how to not just know something, but to live it. And so it's a great honor for me to be here today. I have been doing this work for a very long time, since I was in my late 30s. I'm now currently 73 years old on the planet. I live in the US in a state called Colorado, but I am very drawn to being a global citizen. Because I have found that sometimes we can get so enamored of whatever country we live in that we forget about the whole of the global community. So for me, I prefer to call myself a global citizen. But right now I'm stationed in Colorado of the US. And I got into this field of positive discipline anyway. I do many other things. I'm in, as well as what Annette just said with you, I'm also an energy worker. I am a licensed minister and a non-denominational one, which means I'm not associated with any particular religion. And I'm also someone who is very committed to working with people to bring them together in community of respect. And that means in difficult situations also. So in the 30s, I was a full-time teacher in the classroom, and I was a single mom. I was a single mom for 12 years. I had two boys. At the time that this occurred, they were both teenagers. And I had discovered that when they were small, I pretty much knew what to do, but I was also pretty easy. You know, you kind of controlled. There was really more structure when they were younger. But as they moved into becoming young men, I had absolutely no clue of what to do. And in my fear of the situation in where I was living at the time, and we had a lot of gang activity and a lot of drugs, I was scared as a mom. And so what I did in my fear was I became much more rigid as a parent. And any of you who have teenagers know that the more rigid you become, the more they will act out or do things secretly. Boys are a little more out in the open about acting out. Girls can be a little more secretive. But nevertheless, it's still a form of pushing back against that rigidity when they're trying to become who they are. And I had absolutely no clue. And if I didn't have my hair colored at this point, you would see a lot of teenage frost that would have been added to it because it was a very stressful time. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I was also experiencing a lot of stress in the classroom. I had students, well, first of all, my boss did not like me because I found out later was because I was so creative, and he did not feel safe with creative people. So he wanted me to quit, and he would give me all the most difficult students. So I would get kids that today the term would be a group of many, many traumatized kids. Okay. On top of that, these children were deaf. They could not hear, or they were hard of hearing. And so you combine all of that with very difficult backgrounds that they came from, very low socioeconomic situations. And it was a recipe for a great challenging in the classroom. Mm-hmm. So I found myself crying myself to sleep at night because I didn't know what to do. I was so depressed. And I remember knowing that I loved my own teenage boys and also the kids in my classroom, but I didn't have the wisdom. Mm-hmm. So in my own fashion, I was praying for wisdom. Mm-hmm. And when I was 38 years old in 1988, I came across a notice in my teacher box at the school, and it was a one-day experiential training called Developing Capable People. It was $25, and at that time, $25 was a lot of money for me. But I decided to go because the title intrigued me. It is what I wanted to do. I wanted to help my children, my own boys, and the students in my classroom develop as capable people. So I went for that one day, 8-hour training, and it was an introductory really to a 3-day training. And that just totally transformed me. I knew this was the way I wanted to go. I didn't understand it all, but I recognized it as the wisdom I was looking for. So I bought the 2 books, and one of the books was Positive Discipline that Annette does. And the other book was Raising Self-Reliant Children in a Self-Indulgent World by Steve Glenn. And I devoured the books. If you would see my originals, they've been dropped in the tub. They have food stains on them. They're kind of like, I was going to say, Annette's children. Yes, just like
flying all over the place. Yeah.
Exactly. And I began to implement what I found in both books. And I was amazed.
And did you do that in your home or the classroom first?
Both. I did it simultaneously, both. And of course, it went faster in my classroom. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is our private logic, and how we tend to attach our own sense of self-worth to how our parenting goes or how our teaching goes. Mm-hmm. And so it's much more difficult to begin to implement something if you are so attached to the outcome. And so that was for me a very big thing, is that's why I think it went faster. Plus, my classroom was elementary and my situation at home was with teenagers.
And nevertheless, can you just remind me? I asked Georgiana the same. What age is that? Because
I'm so sorry. Of course. So in the States, teenagers, well, they're starting earlier now. But in my day, back in the 1988, it was around, you'd start around 13 and go up to 18. So about that 5-year span. And at the time that my boys, that I was dealing with my boys, they were 15 and 16.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
And so I began to implement, and I began to see changes, again, much more quickly in the classroom versus my home, but I started to see some changes. And then I had an opportunity the following year, 1989, when I was 39, Steve Glenn came back to train the entire independent school district where I worked. He was taking one teacher from every school within this large school district. And I didn't know about it until the day before. Oh. And I was not picked to go. Someone who was at the hearing school was picked. And I went to her and I said, I heard you were picked. Are you really, really want to take this? And she said, well, no, I don't even know anything about it. Our principal just picked me. And she said, if you really want to go, she said, I'll go and tell him. But he would not allow me to go because, like I said, he did not like me. And so I thought, okay, now what can I do? So I ended up calling the person who was responsible for bringing Steve Glenn in. And I said that I had a small diamond ring that I would give them because I didn't have the money. And I said, but I'll give you this diamond ring and you can sell it. This would mean so much to me, and I'll do free classes for you, to pay you back. And they told me at that point that the only person that could let me in was Steve Glenn because they had their set number. Yes. And at midnight, the night before it started, I got a call and they said, Steve Glenn says you can come and you don't have to sell your ring. But it was because I knew within myself, and those of you who are listening, when you hear something that you say, yes, that's it. That's what I've been looking for. And so the next 3 days were an incredible experience for me, and it totally transformed my life. And as I began to experience the training with Steve, I remember going up to him and I said, I came because I wanted to help my children and the students in my classroom develop as capable people. But what I realize now is that I first must develop as a capable person before I can help them. And I can still see his bald head nodding away under the light, real shiny bald head. And like I said, that was the beginning of everything that I am now doing today in my work.
And he is so fascinating. I looked him up on YouTube after you. I'm going to share his title in the description box of the video if anybody's interested. And it is, so interesting. So what out of this, and then I believe you were also then connected with Jane Nelson's work. What, before we take a deeper dive into Alfred Adler, who this is all really based on, and what I've done, what aspect, you already said you went there to say to help your children and the students, but you learned that it was more about you. So I'm interested, what of these first aspects, or which one did really bring more joy to you as a parent, you know?
You know, that is a really good question, because there were several things. I think the very first, though, was when I heard the words from Steve at that time, talking about the importance of having the courage to be imperfect. And that was, yeah, that's it. The courage to be imperfect. And that was, for me, it was as if, and I think anyone listening knows when you have those moments in your journey, and I know you know this, Annette, when you hear something that is a deep truth that your body has been waiting for, even. And it was as if a bell started to vibrate in my body. And I realized that up until that point, I had been trying so hard to be perfect, to be a perfect mother, to be a perfect teacher. And it came from my early childhood. And we're going to be talking more about this and understanding the whole child. But it doesn't matter where it comes from. It was something that was holding me back to be perfect. And I was not able to learn from anything I was experiencing because of this need and belief that I didn't have any worth unless I was perfect. So that was the first step to beginning to accept my own imperfections, that mistakes truly are a wonderful opportunity to learn, because I certainly hadn't believed it up until then. And then beginning to live it with my students in the classroom and my own boys. And that began to bring so much more, I'm not sure I could go to the word joy, but a relief. And in that relief, I could play more freely. So in that sense, it brought more joy. For example, I realized that many of the students who were in my classroom at that time had had teachers up until they got me who were very, very critical. And these children had, not only were they deaf, but they had many, many what we call today learning disabilities. And they struggled with dyslexia, and there wasn't a lot of help for them. So they had been criticized, they had been judged, some of them because they were from very poor families. And so when they came in to my classroom, they were very sensitive to making mistakes. Very sensitive. I had one little boy, if he got a lower grade on his math test, let's say, and he would rip it up and he would crawl under the desk and barricade himself. I had other kids who would freak out, pull things off the wall, dump over desks. These were very, very, what we now call traumatized children, and deep wounds. Now, I was not a counselor at the time, and I didn't know what to do. And I've shared that with the group that's listening to this. But when I got in touch with this, have the courage to be imperfect, mistakes are opportunities to learn, I started putting up posters around the wall for me to remember first. Okay, because I realized if I wasn't living it, my students wouldn't be able to get it. So for the mistake part, what I did was, and this is where the joy comes in, I asked my students to catch me making a mistake.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And of course they were like shocked, but then they kind of like, oh boy, kind of thing. And I think it was 2 days later, I made some mistake. I don't remember what it was now, but they all, was raising their hand because they were paying attention. Yeah. And they told me, that whatever the mistake was. And I said, oh, this is wonderful. You caught me making a mistake. And I went around the room and I started doing da 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 da, and I made a big deal of how wonderful it was. And then I said, now, what do you think I can learn from this?
Mm.
And so that was the beginning of creating a dialogue to make it playful almost, to discover a mistake, but that was okay. And then, what could we learn? What could we discover from that mistake? And it totally transformed. By the end of the year, my students were no longer afraid of making mistakes. And I had lessened my own. I started to enjoy it. I would start to catch myself. I just made a mistake. Okay, guys, hold on. Let me think about what I can learn from this. And so that brought joy into my teaching. At home, what brought joy in was becoming less personal about the challenges I was dealing with my teenagers.
Mm.
That brought a relief. And with that relief, I could have more enjoyment with them as their own unique human beings. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. Absolutely. And
So I would say that in the early years, that's where I was.
This is so aligned. Whenever I speak with you, I find all these connections to where I'm coming from. And when I was thinking about this question, I was thinking back to that, what exactly you were sharing. Mine was also the concept of having the courage to be imperfect. And the couple who delivered the class, in my case, they said something in addition to that, and you don't have to be the best. And I sat there, Deb, with my mouth open like this. I was 32 years old, and I heard for the first time in my life, I don't have to be the best at everything. And I can't believe that this is what also resonated so deeply with you.
Absolutely. And that's one of the joys, I think, anyway, of this journey, is that we don't have to be the best, because then that puts us here, trying to be here, and thinking we're here. So we have to get up here, and usually it produces competition. But what I did learn, at least in my own personal journey, was to become the best at whoever I was. Mm-hmm. In other words, it wasn't like a competition. It just meant, I could learn to do this better. Mm-hmm. All right. And that ties into, and this of course is not so much in positive discipline, but it is in the encouragement consultant work that I do, that's based on Adler, and also my Adlerian studies and trainings. And that is that inferiority feelings are normal for all human beings. Now, in English, which of course is the language you and I are speaking right now, inferiority has a really not so good connotation. Who wants to be, okay, well, we tend to go right to I am inferior, and that's not what it is. Inferiority feelings are different from being inferior.
Okay, I didn't know.
So if you think, so Adler would say inferiority feelings are natural and normal. So if we didn't have inferiority feelings, we would have no motivation to grow. Okay. Because human beings are not like animals. They're not like trees or plants. They have a choice of whether to grow or not. And we can stop our own growth. Now, physically, we won't stop our growth necessarily, but we can stop our emotional growth. We can stop our mental growth, and of course, our spiritual growth too. We have the choice to stop it. We can choose not to grow. Okay, I'll give you a quick example. When a baby is born, okay, all babies, this transcends culture, all babies are in an inferior position.
Wow.
If they were born full-fledged like this, no mother would be alive on the planet. She would not be able to give birth to a full-fledged adult. This is part of the process of living on the planet. So a baby is born in an inferior position, but the baby doesn't stay thinking, oh, poor me, I'm inferior to my parents. No, no, no. But they know they're in inferior position. And immediately, as soon as they come forth into the world, when they're not resting or eating or sleeping or pooping or peeing, they are beginning to develop their strength. You know, first they're doing a lot of wiggling when they're awake.
Yeah.
Then they're rolling over, and they practice that for a while to get strong. Then they finally figure out how to sit up. They can develop enough muscles. They have enough strength to begin to hold their necks up. And then eventually they begin to crawl and so forth and so on. This is a natural way. So the child is in inferior position. They have inferiority feelings because they can look at the competent giants, their brothers, their sisters, their parents, but they don't go and say, oh, poor me. They don't stop doing what they need to do in order to grow, to stand up, to run, to learn to skip. Okay. So at that point, infants or young children, very young children, know that they are enough.
Oh, that's beautiful.
They know that they are enough to learn whatever they need to learn. However, eventually they hit a roadblock. And this is true all over the planet. It happens sooner or later, depends on the situation with the children. But eventually they are faced with a situation where they can choose to overcompensate, undercompensate, or just keep striving to be better than they were the day before.
Hey.
So that's when you begin to cooperate with life experiences to become better and better and better at being who you are, Annette, and who I am, Deb, with no competition. Okay. However, let's say that I am 4 years old and I see all my friends riding bicycles. Did you ride bicycles back in Germany, in East Germany?
Did, yeah.
Yep. So that was a big thing in the US back in, well, that would have been 1954. That was a big thing back then. Everybody had bicycles. Okay. And I saw my friends. And so I really, really wanted a bicycle. And my dad bought me one. At first it had training wheels. And then, of course, he took them off and I started to ride by myself. But let's imagine that I am starting to ride with no training wheels and all my friends are around me and I fall down. Okay. And my friends start to make fun of me and they, ha, look at you can't even stay up for more than a minute. Boy, you are such a stupid kid. Look at you. Now I have 3 choices at that moment. The first choice is and this ties into positive discipline when we talk about goals. It also ties into Adler because Adler said everything we do is motivated by some goal. Okay. So if I have the goal to ride that bike, but then I add on to it, I am going to be the best bicycle rider there is. I'm going to be the best, and I'm going to be better than that. Okay. So now no longer do I believe I am enough.
Oh. Okay.
I have stopped believing I am enough to learn and to overcome my difficulties. Now I have to be the best in order to be enough. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah, wow, that is so interesting.
So that is what Adler would call overcompensation.
Mhm.
But now I'm starting, instead of having normal inferiority feelings, knowing that, of course, I don't know how to write as much as my friends. They've been doing it for 2 years. Okay. Right. So I do have inferiority feelings that are going to motivate me to want to learn. But if I'm now trying to overcompensate, then I don't believe I am enough. And I am now developing what Adler called an inferiority complex.
Mm. Uh-huh.
So I'm going to try to overcompensate by being the best of everybody that rides a bike. Or my next choice could be, I'm going to give up.
Okay.
There's no way I'm going to be able to be as good as they are.
Okay.
So I give up and I undercompensate.
Mhm.
Okay. Does that make sense so far?
Yes. Yeah.
Over or under, but both are from an inferiority complex.
Ah, they both are. Okay.
They both are. They both are. One is going to be trying to be the best of everybody that rides a bicycle. And the other one is I can't do it, so I give up.
Mhm.
But both are from an inferiority complex. Now, a healthy inferiority feeling, holding on to the belief and not just the belief, but the knowing that I am enough to learn whatever I choose to learn.
Mhm.
Okay. Then I will just say, I'll just laugh it off, get back on, and keep practicing until I can ride well. But I won't be trying to overcompensate with that stress.
Yeah.
I've got to be the best.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? Or dealing with, I give up.
Yeah. So I was wondering where, because I would have explained that I'd say a bit wrong in the past. I would have said that one of them would be a superiority complex. Where does that come in?
So superiority, and of course, we need to remember that when Adler was talking about superiority, he was talking in German.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there, some things get lost in translation. Same thing with ancient teachings that were written in a different language. Sometimes things get lost in the translation. But what it was is there's two ways to be superior. One is to try to be superior over others,
Mhm.
or the other one is I'm just going to see what I can do. How can I be better today than I was yesterday? So there's two ways to strive towards superiority.
Okay.
Okay, so you're going to be continually, I can do this better, which is striving towards a superiority of what I did yesterday. But I'm here, okay, because I'm not competing with anybody unless it's myself. But it's more what can I do better? How can I improve on this? Which brings for me a sense of lightness. It's not, oh, I've got to be better than somebody else kind of thing. But how can I do better?
Yeah.
Like one of the challenges for me is something to do with math.
Mhm.
And anything to do with the government, like doing my taxes. And every time my tax dues comes due and I have to do my taxes, I notice this fear come up in me. Okay. And like I'm going to make this mistake because of my experiences with math in the past. So I keep working at how could I do this better? What could I learn in order to make this easier without so much effort, which of course is why you call your parenting classes effortless parenting. But that is from here, not from, oh, I'm going to be the best at this and I'm going to prove to whoever kind of thing. Is this clear?
Yeah.
So there's two ways to strive towards superiority. One is superiority over others, and one is simply superiority over life's challenges. And how can I take this challenge and learn from it?
Yes.
So for me, when a challenge comes up now, I make that challenge my friend and we walk together. So we're right here together and moving forward. That's the superior. There's, like I said, there's two ways of being superior. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. It does.
Okay. And anyone who wants to do this, for example, or stay here has an inferiority complex. But someone who wants to be up here, their inferiority complex is developing their superiority complex of trying to be over others, when in actuality, they feel very, very inferior.
Inferior. That is such an interesting, and parents, I see that all the time, when they say I had that very recently with a parent who was a client, and they had such an awakening when they thought their child in a power contest, they always thought the child wanted to be above them, and then I explained what I learned from you, and this parent saw how the child actually feels fear or inferior. So what you just explained, this parent was exploring that in front of me, so this
well, and that ties in what your parent was struggling with, and many parents I've worked with, including myself.
Raise my hand. And whoever it feels comfortable watching this to share, please do in the comments below. It always helps, doesn't it, to hear, oh, we're not alone.
Struggle that I have had too. And there is one way to explain that, and it's called the dignity double bind. Okay, so all human beings, doesn't matter how old or young you are, have a need to be treated with dignity and respect, to be seen as a unique human being who is enough on this planet and is here to contribute and is capable of learning. Doesn't mean they know everything, but they're capable of learning what they need to know.
Yeah.
And that they have some form of influence. In other words, the power of choice. We are forgetting on this planet the importance of the power of choice.
Wow, absolutely.
So if you think about those three, the belief that I'm capable, the belief that I matter, that I have value, and that I'm here to contribute, and then I have influence through my power of choice, okay, that is necessary for all people to really experience. Not all people do experience it, but that is a needed thing within the human psyche. And when we can draw that forth from ourselves as well as our children, okay, we come to parenting classes because, well, I came first to fix my kids, my boys, and also the students in my classroom. What I found out is that I first needed to fix me. Okay, but that being said, the awareness that we too must develop in the belief that we're capable of learning whatever we need to learn for the situation. That doesn't mean we know everything, or that we're a failure for not knowing everything. Okay, how many of us have, if someone points out that we didn't know something, starts to feel bad about ourselves because we didn't know it? Okay, and that's because of what we were trained in childhood, and this perfectionism and this trying to be the best, because that's what we were told. We had to be the best. And the best at what? Nobody told me, well, what does that really mean? What does it really mean to be the best? I mean, what is that?
I would love to interject there and bring you an example from a couple of hours when one of my children was sitting across there and saying or asking herself out loud into the room and asking, but who decides whether you're better than someone if you're interested in history or chemistry,
There is the wisdom of these souls that are coming in who see so clearly what I sure didn't see clearly. It's taken me many, many years to get to that point. That's exactly right. That is wisdom. Out of the mouths of babes, as they say, comes words of wisdom. Yes, yes. Very, very true. I'm so grateful you shared that, because that is true.
Yeah.
Who decides? Who decides? And so much of what we accept as quote normal is just based on somebody else's constructs. It's not based on truth.
Yeah.
So going back to this dignity double bind is, if you have a relationship with your child, and this parent that you were talking about, I think it was her son, I think, that you shared. Okay, she's saying, well, they are trying to be more powerful than me, right? Well, she's right.
Yeah.
She's right, because she's doing this to the child, and the child innately knows this isn't right.
Yeah.
This isn't the truth for me.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the child will try to do this, in this case, to the parent or the teacher.
Mhm.
And the teacher or the parent does this. And then the child does this, and it becomes a power struggle for dignity and respect.
Oh, wow.
Instead of finding a way to meet the child here, and the child then, because we've got a model for them. Okay, and we're willing to do this with the children, then they will respond to us. But first, we have to stop doing this to the child. I know better than you. I have more experience. I pay the bills, blah, 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 blah. And what we're doing so often is we're stealing away, or trying to steal away, their dignity.
Yeah.
And so you're right, the mom was right. The child was doing a power struggle, but she was not understanding how she was contributing to it.
Yeah.
Because in her belief system, she was here and the child was here.
And
Does that make sense?
absolutely. And to bring it back from that mom, and back to myself, and what you said earlier, Deb, I wrote it down, that what was difficult was to implement something if we're attached to the outcome. And that's what I'm observing every time. And I still have the constant power contests, when I then go back, and that brings us a bit into this next part, when I bring it back to how much I contribute to that power contest of my child, needing to obey or listen to me. And I'm not starting here. I'm usually starting here, I observe, when I go back, right?
I totally can relate to that, because that's what I was doing too, without seeing it, obviously. But once I did see it, then I had to work at, what am I really afraid of? Why do I think I need to be up here in this situation? What am I afraid of? I had to start asking myself those questions.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, what is right for the needs of the situation? How can I respect myself, respect my child, and respect the needs of the situation? And once I started to check off those 3 boxes on the trinity, or the triangle,
okay, yeah,
that made all the difference in the world for me. It got me to pause, got me to take a breath, and it got me to say, because I was just as important in the triangle: respect for self, dignity for self, dignity for the child in this case, and dignity and respect for the needs of the situation.
I love that. I've never seen that before. It makes so much sense. I always thought it was either obviously the respect for the child and the parent, and I saw the situation as either the parent or the situation. So thanks for helping me to see that it's a triangle, and it's the
Yes. Yeah. Early on in when we started doing the global mentor group during the pandemic, I introduced that, and then Hillary drew those of you who haven't met Hillary, but drew this. I kept doing the triangle, and so then she put in the Triskelon of the Irish, the Celtic.
Wow. Yeah. I was looking at one this morning. I wish I had bought the book.
So you see, but again, that just points out that truth is truth, and it transcends cultures. Of course, there's certain cultural differences where we have different foods and different clothing or different heroes in our myths and things, but there is underneath all cultures a truth that connects us all. And dignity and respect for self, for the other person, in this case, we're talking about children, and the needs of the situation. When all of those are met, you are walking this path.
Oh, wow, that is profound.
Yeah. Well, it's made all the difference in the world. And it gets me to stop and think, because all of us you and I that are experiencing this together right now, but anyone who listens to this, also, we've all experienced very difficult relationships, not just with our kids, but with a partner or a boss or a relative, a close relative.
Or an own parent, right? Our own parents, yeah.
Exactly. And for me to have to step back and say, okay, how can I respect myself in this situation? How can I respect, in this case, my parent, my mother, who I had many challenges with? And how can I also respect the needs of the situation? So that for me has become almost a spiritual meditation.
Yes, absolutely.
That keeps very grounded in relationships, because what we're talking about today is all about relationships. And when we get into our agendas in a relationship is when we stop treating ourselves, others, and the needs of the situation in respect. Agendas are not about relationships. Agendas of what we want to do. But then we assume sometimes with our children, in other words, like, let's say we have to get out the door in the morning for work, for example, and we've got to get the kids to school. And so we have an agenda. The kids have to eat their breakfast, they need to get dressed, they need to get in the car. I have to get my papers for work or whatever and get in the car, and we have to be there on a certain time.
Yeah.
Okay. And so there's the agenda. The minute we start focusing on our agenda of getting out the door is when our children disconnect from us, because we've disconnected from them. And we've forgotten about the relationship. And what happens with most kids is then they will do this because we're here with our agenda and we're trying to get them out that door. And they will then do this to us and dawdle. Slowly eat their cereal, whatever it takes.
Yes, sounds familiar.
Yes. Oh, I know. I've lived it. I've lived it. And it was a huge lesson for me to realize that I had contributed to it, that they were showing me that I had disconnected from them and was really, in many ways, not seeing them as unique human beings, but as an object to get out the door. And so then they proved to me, I'm no object. I have choice, and I'm going to do this to you because you're doing this to me. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes, absolutely. It does. It does. It really does. And we've got so many beautiful tools,